Well, y'all, this was not the project I set out to make. But you know what? Sometimes you make dumb mistakes. Sometimes you set an impossible deadline you can't keep. I didn't make it to the Ren Fair yesterday. Sometimes you see something sparkly in the store and you know that it's going to cause nothing but heartache and tears, but you buy it anyway because sparkly. And sometimes life throws you a curveball, completely depleting your entire fabric budget for the year, forcing you to change your plans. These stays seemed destined to fail from the very beginning. But you know what? Today, we are going to make it work because sometimes your plan B opens up opportunities you never even dreamed of. Hey y'all, Sebastian the Crab here and welcome to Fantastical Follies. Firstly, I want to say a huge welcome and thank you to everyone who has found their way here through my drafting stays video. The response has been phenomenal and mind-blowing, and I am so very grateful to every one of you who decided to stick around, as well as all of you all who come back video after video. If you're new here, please drop into the comments below and introduce yourself. I would love to hear from you. And if you're returning, why don't you let me know what your favorite version of The Little Mermaid is? I am so excited for the new live action film that's coming out at the end of the month. Okay, this is fun and I'd like to wear it for the whole video, but I'm rattling too much. Okay, that's enough mush for one video. Let's try and save these stays from Ursula. I mean, disaster. Thanks to the phone debacle of March 2023, I no longer have it in my budget to buy the tonal silk that I was going to use to make these stays, and now I need to use something in my stash. For those of you who watched me make the trousers for this project, you know that the color they turned out was not the color I intended, because I was going for like a jewel-toned look for this character. And honestly, I do like the color, but I've run into an issue. So I have two options that would even remotely work for this project. The first is a navy blue quilting cotton, and the second is like a dark aqua quilting cotton. So the dark aqua doesn't work at all, I think. They're too mid-toned. And while I really like the navy with the sage green of the pants, and while I like the navy with the purple of the cloak, I don't necessarily like the navy with the sage green and the purple of the cloak. I think that the stays need to be a little more monochromatic for this look not to be like, whoa! So what I think I'm going to do is take the lighter blue and use the forest green dye that I used to dye my Ionic chitin, which turned out teal, and see if I can get the fabric to more of a teal green color. Fingers crossed we can get this to look decent. So I just put the finished dyed fabric next to the rest of the pieces in this costume and came to a bizarre realization. Is it just me, or is this color combination giving off serious Ariel vibes? I was going to use black coutil to back these stays, but you know what else I have in my stash? Decision made. Let's make these stays reversible and make them full-on Little Mermaid. Okay, so I just had a bit of a think as I was ironing my dyed fabric out, and it's a little bit see-through and I didn't know what to do with the purple decision made. This is such a normal refrain for me now, but I don't think I have enough thread to do the whole thing. So I've just decided that I'm going to cut out 2 layers of the teal and then back it with the coutil. This solves 2 problems. It solves the thread issue, and it also means that I can work on building the stays while I'm doing the embroidery, because otherwise I would have to do all of the embroidery first and then assemble all of the stays pieces together. So let me show you what I'm gonna do. It's a little bit weird. Okay, so this is gonna be my front piece, the fashion fabric, right? There's no seam allowance on my pattern. So I'm gonna trace the line of the stays This is the final piece in my Adelasia project, where I'm building a mage's outfit straight out of a fantasy novel. The front half of these Elizabethan stays embroidered with gold work is going to be the Adelasia side. If you've missed the making of my hand-embroidered purple cloak and adjustable petticoat trousers, those videos and the rest in the series are compiled in a handy playlist for your viewing pleasure and linked in the description below. Now I'm gonna take some tracing paper, not the green, and trace the line on the other side. Now this doesn't have to be perfect because this is just an approximation for the embroidery process. I've already decided that I am going to embroider in the no-go zones. So here, here, and here. I traced the channel lines onto both sides of the stays using my tracing paper. Since I have plenty of fabric, I'm gonna give myself like a 2-inch seam allowance on the top. I'm just gonna cut it across. And that way, if the fabric shrinks with the embroidery, then I can take my stays pattern back over it and retrace it when I'm done embroidering. Now to cut the inner lining. Trace with a friction pen on one side and use the tracing paper on the other. Then cut it out using approximately 1/2 inch of seam allowance. Time to settle down and trace the boning channels. Handy tip, mark only the top and bottom of the channels with the tracing paper, and then use a straight ruler to complete the lines. This will keep your lines from getting wobbly from the wheel thingamabob. Yet another stupid mistake. This should have been done with the Ariel side of the stays facing up so that I could sew it on the machine that way. So I sat down and redid everything. Yikes. Time to match Ariel to the interlining. I smoothed everything out and pinned it lightly since everything's going to shift during sewing. And y'all, is it gonna shift? And now, time for the boning channels. This is by far the worst part of stay making. Hello and welcome to Extreme Sewing. It's time to gear up. You got your beverage? Check. You got your headphones? Check. It's time. What? Start your engines! Oh! Well, that didn't go as planned. The machine just completely chewed up that quilting cotton. I knew going in it was a possibility, so I'm not surprised, but I am a little frustrated. I need to put some scrap fabric on the back and re-sew some of the boning channels to make sure that the boning channels are secure. I don't know what all this wrinkling means for the general structure of the stays. I'm hoping it'll be all right because the cotillion is nice and straight. I will say, thank the gods that I decided to do some interlining on this and make the fashion fabric just flat on the front, because if I had spent all of that time embroidering the front of it only to have it be chewed up by the machine, I would have had a mental breakdown. On today's episode of Piecing is Period. Oh my god, y'all. This is so ugly. Look at this hot mess. Oh man, this just goes to show, you know, not everything turns out perfectly. It's the inner lining, nobody's gonna see it, so, you know. I traced over my friction pen marks with green chalk so I could try and iron out some of those horrendous wrinkles. What I didn't tell y'all earlier is that I am kind of rushing this project. I had wanted to start it earlier, but busy season got in the way of that. And I'm going to the Renaissance Fair on Saturday, and I really want to wear these stays to the Ren Fair. It's Thursday afternoon. Whether that's feasible or not, I'm not sure. I'm supposed to be relaxing, not working. But this is fun. This is fun. I promise I'm having fun. First order of business was to transfer the boning from my mock-up to the real deal. As you can see by the look on my base, this is so much fun. Really a blast. The best time. Don't try this at home, folks. No, really. That was not pleasant. Then I marked and cut my tabs so I could try it on and do another fitting. We are assembled mostly. I do need to make the straps a little bit shorter. So if you watched the drafting and mock-up video for these stays, you know that the biggest issue I was having was on the side. I do think that I would like it to go a little bit higher than where the line is. So I think I'm gonna go up about 3/8 of an inch. So one slight modification I would like to make is I would like to make my tabs a little bit shorter in the back. Also, as you can see, my tabs are completely different sizes. I suck at dividing. You know what? I'll live with it. Nobody's gonna look at my stays and be like, her tabs are uneven. Or at least I would hope so. Don't say that to people. So the next step is to sand the boning, which is absolutely my least favorite thing to do. And it's like 80 something outside and you have to do it outside. So I may put it off till the sun starts to go down, in which case I won't be able to film, but you can just imagine me sanding a bunch of boning. Maybe I'll do one for dramatic effect and stick it in as B-roll. But first, I needed to make my adjustments. Starting at the underarm point, I measured up 3/8 of an inch from the top and tapered it down toward the front portion of the stays. Then I cut upward. I know this is kind of scary, but trust in yourself and your ability to do the fitting properly. The file was new and I was hoping it would work better than the other options that I've used in the past, but in the end, the plain sandpaper did the best job. Woohoo! With that, we're done.
And now for something completely different.
All right, I promised gold work embroidery. Here's the gold work embroidery. Now, is this perfect gold work embroidery? No. First of all, I'm not made of money. This is embroidery floss, not gold. Secondly, I did do the whole bind stitch the way that you're supposed to so that it looks the same on the front and the back. So as I started on the second section, which is the little branches, I realized how hard it was going to be to do any kind of real design as black work or gold work, because this is not even weave fabric. This is really cheap quilting cotton from Joann's. And then I realized exactly how long it was going to take to try and do it the gold work way, where you make everything the same on the front and the back so that it is reversible. And since I'm trying to get this done in the next 2 days, I just decided to go with the flow. You're not gonna see the back of this. We're just gonna make it work. Okay, so the first section is the whole bind stitch. It makes a continuous line. The second is just normal embroidery. I used some chalk and I just drew out my little branchy guys. Now I'm working on the third section. I'm gonna start with a line of stars down the center, and then I might do 2 more lines of stars. And then I'm gonna see where I'm at and what I feel like, and that might be the end of it, or I might add an additional embellishment. So that's the plan. Here's some juicy embroidery footage for y'all. Here's the finished design. As you can see, it's a bit uneven. This is not a skill I'm particularly adept at, which is why I didn't give a full tutorial, but I still think it's pretty. I just got back from the store. I had to go pick up some more embroidery floss so I can finish this today. And did I buy gold lamé bias tape to bind the edges of my stays? Yes, I did. Has this taken this project from classy to cheesy in 2 seconds flat? Yes, it has. Has this made me incredibly happy? Yeah. Y'all, wait to see what kind of problems that's gonna cause. Next, I snipped the bottom of my tabs by 1/2 inch on the back 3. Here's the final interlining adjustments. This is not pretty, but it'll do the trick and hopefully prevent the boning from poking me. I ended up cutting 2 2-inch straps for my coutil. I lined them with 1 layer of the teal fabric. The binding tape was a little wide for my taste, especially given its resemblance to 1980s party wear, so I decided to cut it in half. Whether that was a good idea or not, we'll see later. Next, it was time to sew the bottom edge. Then I pushed down all of my boning into the channels and did the same to the top. To save time, I machine sewed the bias tape onto the straps on the teal side. This will get folded over and hand sewn to the other. I learned something from this step, and it's that cotillion is very difficult to do tunnel or hem stitch into by hand. Better to stitch on that side, flip and whip down the stitches on the quilting cotton. I also found that this particular bias tape didn't take the hem stitch well at all. Can you see here the difference between the hem stitch and the much neater tunnel stitch? Now to make the eyelets. I'm using 2 strands of embroidery floss, waxed and doubled. I measured 1/2 inch away from the edge and made a dot in the center of the strap. Then I used my favorite tool, the holy pokey thing, to make the hole. It's always better to use an awl than cutting the fabric, because this keeps most of the threads intact, making your fabric and the eyelet stronger. Then just whip stitch around the hole. Some people have like an exact number of stitches they like to make around each eyelet, but I don't faff about with that. Now, a lot of people hate sewing eyelets like they hate sewing buttonholes, but me personally, I kind of enjoy it. Firstly, it doesn't take that long, and I find that they tend to be neater than trying to do them on the machine, and also sharp objects. Speaking of eyelets, let's mark the ones down the back while we're thinking about it. I've chosen a 1-inch eyelet space. The top eyelets on each side of the stays are equidistant from the top. From there, on one side, you measure down 1/2 of the regular width of your eyelet distance and make another eyelet. On that side, your eyelets will extend down every inch from that point. Remember that your stays or corset will have a slightly different fit when you have the final eyelets or grommets in versus the lacing strips you use during the mock-up process. It's always good to do this before you bind the edges in case you have to make any final adjustments. We're using the historically accurate method of spiral lacing here. On the other side, the eyelets extend down 1 inch from the top eyelet all the way down to the bottom, where after the last eyelet, you'll make a final one at 1/2 your regular distance. This creates a zigzag effect with an anchor eyelet on both the top and the bottom. P.S. I really like this eyelet guide. I've linked to it in the description below if you want one for yourself. Time to assemble everything together. I traced out the lines of the stays onto my embroidered fabric. Honestly, I did a terrible job with it, but these are costume stays and not, fancy historical ones, so it is what it is. I spent quite a bit of time lining everything up to make sure it was all even. Get everything pinned smooth, then flip it around and cut it out. Once the eyelets were sewn through all layers, it was time to lace that guy up. I got some parachute cord for this purpose because it was cheap and strong. I used a tapestry needle for this job because it's what I have. It has a wide eye and a blunt tip. Anything similar will suffice. Not wide enough, apparently? No. Really not wide enough. Pliers? Pliers? Nope. No pliers. Oh my god. So we'll just manually do it instead. I didn't make it to the Ren Fair yesterday. Well, I made it to the Ren Fair, but I didn't make the Ren Fair in the stays. As you can see, I'm still working on them. If you're new to corsetry, or if you're not new to corsetry, let this be a lesson to you. It takes way longer than you think it does. Not a hard process, but it is time consuming. I am getting some wrinkling in the fashion fabric, and I think partially I didn't get it quite on grain. It's too late to turn back now.
Turn back before it's too late.
Now, I wasn't quite happy looking back at the video footage of where I had my straps, so I have pinned them on in the back, and I kind of pulled them up to figure out where I want them, and I think like right here is where I'm going to put the eyelets. The last thing to do before I put in the rest of the binding is just to wear them. Make sure there aren't any problems. I will say the gold lamé binding I am starting to regret a little bit. It definitely frays every time I put my needle in it. It's not neat, and I don't know if it's going to be a good protective barrier between me and the boning. It's what I have for now, and we're trying to do this on a budget, so I'm gonna live with it for now, but in the future I may rebind them. Well friends, I have good news and bad news. Good news, while I was experiencing a little bit of discomfort last night while I was wearing my stays, mostly the straps were itching me and things were poking me in kind of weird spots, I realized very quickly it was because my straps were too long. And once I had pinched up my straps about 1.5 inches, most of those issues went away except the scratchiness, which leads us to the bad news. And if you saw the thumbnail to this video, you may suspect what I'm about to say next. At 9:50 last night, I decided to 86 the gold lamé tape. It was taking me forever to sew. It was fraying at the slightest glance. It was itching me where it was fraying on the straps. It just needed to be done. If I had kept that on there, Paul Hollywood would have kicked me out of Bake Off faster than you can say handshake. And if you've ever been a victim of style over substance and regretted it later, don't forget to subscribe because you're in good company here. Instead, I did what I should have done in the first place and grabbed my tape, grabbed some fiber reactive dye out of my stash, and dyed myself some gold binding out of proper fabric, which is going to actually protect me from the boning instead of the flimsy lamé, which I was already complaining about. Added bonus, I'm going to use my handy dandy Lumiere paint to give it a little bit of gold shine, so it's still a little sparkly. I just wish I had followed my instincts at the very beginning when I was thinking it was going to be a bad idea and not put myself back 4 days because of that stupid binding. All right, we'll get this painted, we'll get it sewn, and then finally, if nothing else goes wrong, we can see the reveal. The painted tape is definitely a lot stiffer than I'd prefer, but it's still going to do a much better job than the lamé binding. When you're using cotton twill tape instead of pre-made bias tape, I highly recommend folding it in half and ironing before you begin to pin. If you want to be extra, iron on one side just a scotch longer than the other to accommodate having to fold over the edge of the stays. Place the tape over the edge of the stays so that your crease cradles the edge and pin. Notice I'm pinning on the cotillion side, so this time I didn't have such a hard time whipping it down. Once the tape was backstitched onto the Ariel side, I flipped around and carefully stitched down the back of the tape. The downside to adding the paint is that I'm not getting the smooth, clean curves and edges that I usually get with this tape. Oh well, we're almost done, and at this point, that's all that counts. Here's the finished strap. It's about 2 inches shorter than the original, and I curved down the edges because I thought the straight edge looked kind of messy. I also reduced the width to 1 3/4 inch. It's done. Finally. I got through all of the mistakes and all of the issues. I almost gave up several times, but I'm glad I made it through, and honestly, I'm happy with the way they've turned out. If you're enjoying this video and want to support my channel further, I do have a Ko-fi account which is linked in the description below. There you can leave me a one-time tip if you have the means. I'm working on getting y'all some fun supplemental content up there, and I'm also running a contest from now through the beginning of November. Each donation counts as an entry to receive a handmade historical accessory chosen by you and made by yours truly. So without further ado, let's take a look at the reveals.
Thanks for watching. Yeah, thanks for watching. Wait, don't go. Yeah, stay and watch another video. Yeah, look at all these great playlists. Stay and watch another. Stay and watch another.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.